Tribe, team, or family? What does the best describe your organization?
This podcast is brought to you by Archimed, fast and focused design and manufacturing.
I'm Greg Maurer, founder and owner of Archimed.
And I'm Caroline Squatrigo, Talent Engagement Specialist. We are on a journey to grow, learn, and gain expertise in small to mid-size company culture. Join us.
All right, Gavin, what's the question of the day?
Today we are going to talk about what is the best use to describe an organization, tribe, team, or family. We will first talk to Aaron Kane and get his opinion on what he thinks Archimed is and why. Next, Mike Bensey will join us to discuss the differences between the three and which he thinks is best to describe an organization.
Okay, today we are joined by Aaron Kane, and Aaron is Archimed's lead CNC programmer over in our milling area. And we were really curious to hear really everybody's take on this topic. So we did kind of an informal survey on how would Archimed's own people describe our culture. We talked about a couple of terms. I think we talked about family, tribe, team, and we got a lot of interesting responses. And really, I think everybody had a very good why behind the term that they were choosing. So, Aaron, I just want to hear a little bit from you about how you would describe Archimed's culture and why you would put us into that context.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I chose Tribe because I felt like Archimed is a group of individual units or groups of people working together within a larger unit to achieve the big goal, which is ultimately, I guess, what a tribe is. So that's why I picked that one when I was asked.
Yeah, and I feel like I love your definition because when we talked about it, it's very much about like everybody doing their part. If I understand correctly, to kind of reach, like you said, reach our big goal. And I think implied is if we're not all working together, there's a good chance we'll miss that goal.
Correct. We all are pulling the rope in the same direction ultimately, but I think there's silos or groups or units or however you want to define that lead the way to get there. Um, I don't think that family applies to our group as a whole because I feel like a family unit is one cohesive unit. And this could get into semantics, and different people have different meanings for all of the words that we chose. Um, but I thought there was a big difference between family and tribe. Um, and I definitely thought tribe fit us. And I definitely think that within the tribe, there might be families um, that work together in unison, and then the families come together to form the tribe, which achieves the ultimate goal. So I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your take. I think it's been really clear if people have been listening. Greg and I have had a little bit of a disagreement on this topic, which is why we wanted to do the podcast about it. So we will bring on Mike Bensey so we can hear kind of his expert take on this. And I don't know. I don't know if I think there's a right answer, but I guess we'll see what Mike has to say and figure out where we land on this. But thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Bensey, thanks for coming on the podcast today and help us figure out what to call our beautiful. I think the only thing that's legal so far is I can call it a company, but after that, I don't know what to call it. So, Mike's a partner of Archimed's been helping us as a consultancy to help us with our people related issues. And one thing I really love about Mike is his favorite question, which is, how can I help you? And I just think that sets the tone for our partnership, Mike, because you've been so helpful to us. So anyone who's interested in Mike, go to Mike Benzi, BENSI.com, and check him out. So Mike, thanks for helping us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for the plug, man. I couldn't have said it better myself, so that's great, and have loved working with you and the Archimed team for all these years. It's awesome to see how you guys have grown.
Thank you. Well, we've grown so much that now I need to find out what to call ourselves. And so I had sort of thrown around this idea. I've used the word family to describe how I feel about Archimed. And to me, that word fits. It's the Archimed family. But I was getting some feedback. Certainly out there in the literature, I'm in the vast minority as far as holding the opinion that the word family is a good word to use to describe a company. And so I don't know, maybe I shouldn't call it a family. Maybe it's a team, maybe it's a community or tribe or neighborhood, or I don't know what it is. So help us out.
No, definitely. Well, I mean, and I get that, right? I've worked with Archimed, where I would bet if I talked to 5 people out on the floor today, they would agree with that word family. They would not be surprised by it. And at the end of the day, too, I'm not on a campaign to tell people not to call their companies families. But it is kind of a curious conversation. And one that came up for me personally is that, I think I've done this with Archimed back in the day too, but there are times where companies will bring me in. They will ask me to kind of get a feel from employees in terms of what's going well, what can we do to improve. And, many times, when I come in, the number one reason that people say they like working at a company is because they feel like it's family, right? It just seems like a very natural thing. The interesting thing, and the reason why it always caused me a little bit of pause on that word family, is because when I start asking about, well, what can we do better? It also starts to sound like family in that we don't confront issues. We let poor performers stick around way too long, which, we talked about Thanksgiving before the call started recording, but at the last Thanksgiving dinner, and I love my family, I love my in-laws, that Thanksgiving dinner table left a lot of things that were left unsaid, wondering, gosh, why don't we ever talk to that person about their problem? And so it is kind of this a little conundrum of what to call people. So I get family. I'm curious, where did this crusade start for you, Greg? Where did you start trying to put a name to this?
Well, I naturally just used the word family, and then I think I got a couple reference points. Someone said, well, I had a horrible family life, so that's a negative connotation for me. And I thought, okay, I appreciate that. And someone says, well, you don't fire family. And I said, well, you have never met my Uncle Joe then, so so I just wanted to know whether I was having unintended consequences to using the word family. And Gavin's with us today as the co-host. Gavin's producing our podcast, and he's now today standing in for Caroline as the co-host. And Gavin, you've been with Archimed a lot less time than I have. What was your initial thoughts? That family, not family, tribe? What do you think?
Yeah, so initially, I kind of saw it as more of a family just because it felt like a closer kind of knit company than other places I've worked at. So that family was just the first word that popped up because family usually means like close. But then actually I was put in charge of doing a survey within the company and kind of asking what are different employees' opinions on it. And family was brought up, but team was also brought up. And like team kind of sticks with me because I've been part of teams that can be really close. And then the last one was really interesting to me was tribe because they described it in a way of it's a bunch of families together, which is kind of what a tribe is. So that's kind of the take that I got of it from the short time I've been at Archimed.
That's lovely. No, it's for sure. Yeah, and I'm always curious kind of where that conversation starts. The one other piece of feedback when I think I hear companies talk about, what do we call it? Is it family? Is it community? What is this? Is that, and especially since the last 2 years with the start of the pandemic, is when we call each other family in a way that we're in some way, are we putting that company needs to become first, right? If family is always first, by calling the company family, are we asking our employees to put the company first as well? And I think that's where a little bit of the rub might come in terms of that, whether it's the you know past histories that we've had with our own families, but also just in terms of how we're trying to prioritize our lives, and what we need to put first. Um, I don't see that at Archimed, in terms of asking employees to kind of go all in on the company and put everything else last. But I do hear that in other organizations in terms of that, wanting to avoid a sense of that by a company calling itself a family, that therefore we need to become first.
Yeah, I get that. Um, and Gavin, I don't know about the teams because we have so many teams already. So you have to have something that describes the collection of all these various teams, some departmental, some cross-functional. So the survey, did they ask about other? Did you ask about other phrases? You have tribe, team, and family.
Yeah, those were the three that I'd stuck with just to give kind of people a base to go off of. Um, After asking, and I also said like other, like what other way would you describe it? But most people stuck with those three. I would say family and tribe were probably the two most common ones.
Well, we had a previous guest, Lindsay Picardo, who brought up the concept of a village. It takes a village, and
Yeah.
a village is a collection of various families or tribes or what have you. Um, what are your thoughts on village? It doesn't really ring well. I mean, you can't. The Archimed village sounds like cumbersome to me.
Right. Or Gavin, this may not apply to you. Greg, this might show my age, but the village people, right? That might be another way to think about it too. No, I think and Lindsay knows her stuff, right? So I think village is lovely. I think village, to your point, might come off, might a little be harder to for others to say or do, but I think it connects a little bit with tribe, which Gavin, to your point, right, kind of a collection of families. Um, if we are trying to think of something, I read somewhere where the word community, right, a place where you can feel like you can belong, that people care about you. At the end of the day, those are the two things we really care about in terms of putting a name to this thing, right? Do people feel like they belong? Do people feel cared for? Really, that's it. Community is another word, not to keep throwing other options out there for you, but it doesn't seem to have that family connotation. It has no connection to sports, right? Avoiding the word team. It is, if we are a community, then we are looking out for each other. We are trying to make sure that everybody feels like they belong here.
Yeah, to go off of that, when you said like labeling as community to make people feel like they are a part of something and they do belong somewhere, do you think it is important to define a company's culture like with a label, or like maybe the need doesn't need to happen, or do you think it is necessary because it does give people that belonging feeling?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of defining, of labeling. My worry with putting so much of an emphasis there is that I see so many people put so much effort into labeling and defining, and then once they do that, they're like, "Yay, we did it!" Right? We labeled it. We know we could put words to it. We'll put them on the wall, and then because we've defined it, we're done. We don't have anything else to do. Whereas the real work comes after that, right? Just because we've put a name to it, um, doesn't mean that we've really done anything. It really comes into, okay, how are we going to show these things in our day to day? How are we going to ensure that these things are what are valued most important in our organization, in our community, in our village, in our family, and show that in our behaviors through the day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the things we talk about internally at Archimed, and how we've helped each other out uh, in very personal ways. So it's definitely more than a team to me. And it still feels like a family to me, but what are the unintended consequences of the owner calling it a family? You mentioned one, which is what he wants me to prioritize this over everything else. Are there other?
Two, I think what you all have heard as well is just, kind of the family background. Not everybody responds to that family word as well as others, just because of how we grew up, which is unfortunate, but it is reality. And so, I think, thinking of those unintended consequences, those are pretty big, right? In terms of calling it a family, like, oh my gosh, not only do I have to prioritize my life, but man, when I remember my family, I'm not sure I want to be around that. What am I not signing up for? Um, in kind of supporting employees in that way.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, Greg, does it have to have a label?
So you said you were a fan of a label, and I do think it gives you something to it's a concise way to refer to something that's very valuable to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other way to do it is calling it, the company or Archimed, which is sort of sterile.
Mm.
So I gotta refer it to something. And so what is this group of people that I care a lot about, that I spend a lot of time with,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think about not just what they do at the company, but outside their lives and their kids. And yeah, I maybe it's just how I'm wired, but I think it's convenient.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. Archimed is such a unique name. I'm surprised to hear that you use the word sterile.
Well, sterile in the sense that it doesn't give you a sense of warmth, or it doesn't make you feel like it's a collection of actual living people, rather than a website and products that get shipped.
Mm.
That's what I mean. It's just, it doesn't describe the fact that one associate took the time to help another associate find an apartment, or that somebody called me the other day, needed some legal advice, and that's lost. That we care about each other, and that shows up in our actions.
Mm-hmm.
I would like it to that those aspects, or those types of aspects, to be reflected in the name.
Got it. So I wonder then, and kind of to my point earlier of, like, great, yeah, yes, we need to label it, and we need to show kind of how do we expect those behaviors? What are those behaviors? I wonder if defining Archimed internally might be worth kind of looking at in that way, rather than thinking about, do we call it family versus team, but rather, gosh, what does Archimed mean for us internally? And I think, again, I'm bragging on you here a little bit, but I've seen that through just the values that you all have and you instill within the organization. How you and others are accessible to employees, how employees help each other out. I think there's so many amazing behaviors that, I'm almost thinking of Ray Dalio's book Principles, where he talks about, rather than focusing on just values, just a term, community, family, he focused on, gosh, what are the principles? What are those actual behaviors that we really value and still must have in our organization that really will define who we are
Mm-hmm.
in the long run?
So, Mike, would you say it's like more important, kind of off of what you're just saying, that maybe it's more important to label the attributes like individually and like the values, more than just putting a label on all of it together and putting it all into a singular group like a family or a whatever sense in that way?
Yeah, I think for how you all are evolving, I think that it sounds like that's where you're at. If I think when I met you how many ever years ago, putting values out there were super important because you needed to really set the stage, set the tone for people. But now, because you are getting so much larger, I see a lot of organizations doing this as well. I worked with another client where they created, they had only 3 values, but because those values were so broad, they really went into detail. I think they wound up having 5 to 7 different behaviors that explained the value, so that it provided more detail, but also just in terms of, well, what do we actually mean when we say those things?
What about the Exact Target model? I think they called themselves Team Orange, or Orange was like being orange. That they picked a color, and
Right.
so that was for them, that was a unifying aspect. So Team Orange,
Absolutely. Yeah, right. No, absolutely. No, and I think you still see people, how many years has that been, that are still looking back to those days fondly, but also I bet you if you brought that orange color out, that they know exactly what that is.
hmm
I was not in those Exact Target days, but having talked to enough people, I would hedge a bet that, one, having that brand was super important, but also they did a lot of work to explain, what does that brand really mean? What does it mean to be Team Orange, in a way, in terms of the values that we put on, the attributes, the behaviors, those principles, if you will.
hmm
That Team Orange gives a good rallying cry, so that you don't have to go explain all 21 different behaviors, right, and take 30 minutes of somebody's time to explain that point. But having that rallying cry is a great way to brand that employee experience.
Yeah, that's goes back to your earlier point that the real work comes after the label.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what do you think about a yay or nay on family? You said you're not here to politic us into choosing one way or the other, and you felt like, okay, well, maybe Archimed is a family, but is it best practice or not?
I don't see it as best practice. I don't see many clients, when they are talking about their culture, talking about, that Team Orange, if you will, talking about their brand. I don't see a lot of them relying on it as family. So, not that I'm not a fan, just that it doesn't seem like it's a best practice. I'd probably see the two that are more common are team, number one, and then community, number two, just in terms of the types of organizations that exists. So I don't know if I'm helping the voting process at Archimed, but those would be the votes I'd submit.
Do you think that labeling it largely plays on a role of how large a company could be?
Um, yes and no. I think I think if I take Archimed, yes, you've grown in size, but I think you've also grown in complexity, and I see a lot of small organizations who are really complex, that think about this type of thing, on a regular basis. So I think of it less in terms of how many employees do we have, but just more of how complex are we? How, in terms of the clients that we serve, the work that we do, how we communicate to each other. Those are a lot of more important factors, if you will, than just we added more people.
So maybe we'll go back to the beginning here, and I said I'd like to have a label, to give it, I guess, convenience. Maybe we should just go back to the top and wonder again. Should we just leave it to others to refer to the company based on what they believe in, and not centralize that into a brand, so to speak?
Well, I love that you're involving employees, for sure. I think allowing them to have a voice into it is super important, and especially if you want them to continue. And I wonder, even if you all did decide on tribe versus family versus community, if that would really be your brand. I think it might just be a way to refer to it. But I think, to your point, in terms of thinking of that Exact Target example, I wonder if the real opportunity is just putting that brand around it, and putting a message that is more meaningful to you all as Archimed than anything that would be similar to what another company might be calling themselves, that might sound similar to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I thought that was a lot of fun with Mike, Gavin. And by the way, Gavin, thanks for stepping in place of Caroline today. It was fun to do the podcast with you.
Yeah, no problem.
So we sort of went in a circle. I felt like, out of the gate, family makes sense. And then someone will say, well, family comes first. What do you want me to prioritize argument over everything else? And I had a negative connotation around family. Okay, so maybe it's not family, maybe it's team. But I don't like sports analogies. And, as you discussed, there's so many teams already. And so everything's a team. So then we're back to family. I don't know. I don't think I have an answer.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. I felt like we were just kind of going in one big loop. I just think it's one of these topics that you could debate all day with someone, because they're gonna have. It really just comes down to what is someone's definitions of each term. Like, what's someone's belief on family? People who have really close families, and if they work in an organization that they feel really comfortable and really close in, they're going to define it as a family. If they don't have a good connotation to family, and they enjoy where they work and they're really close to everyone, then they might see calling it a family isn't like offensive. It's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and that's why I was blessed to have a warm family upbringing, and I feel very close to the Archimed associates, and I think about them more than I ever did with any kind of teammate I ever had on any sports team, for sure. But maybe that's just by virtue of my position, and that's why it might work for me, but it doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. So but let's go back. What do you think? Do we need to answer this question, or, because sometimes I say the word family in passing, so it's not a brand, it's just a reference. And is that okay or not? I don't know.
Yeah, I think from a branding standpoint, it'd be nice to come up with a label that you can all kind of get around. But at the same time, what I think is more important to an organization is maybe just having that discussion and then asking, well, why do you label it that? Like, why does one person label it family, and then they give you the reasons why, and you want to hope to hear, well, I think family means, you can be open, you can be comfortable around people, and you guys are all kind of working together. And then maybe someone who says teams, like, I really like sports, and like really good teams all seem really close together and they're all working towards the same goal. And that's why I see this as a team. And I think the important relies more on their definition rather than the label. But I think definitely it could be something that you want to label, because from like a branding, and maybe when you are giving kind of speeches, you want to say, this is our family or this is our team. It would be nice to have something that is set in stone as your label.
Yeah, I was, for some reason, what popped in my head was the TV show Survivor. I don't know if it's even still on, but
It is.
Is it really? Gosh.
Yes, I'm a big fan.
I mean, I think I watched it 20 years ago, maybe. It's been a long time, but I thought how, that there's a group of people that are, every once in a while, they're getting together on this island, but every once in a while you got to vote somebody off.
Mm.
I was thinking like, well, it's what we've created at Archimed has aspects of family, aspects of team. It really does have a lot of aspects of community, in that, you can choose to join or not a community, right? That's a decision you can make. And when you join, you belong there. You have people there that care about you, and there's a lot that you have in common. And but it does leave out the aspect of team, that community does not necessarily imply that you have central goals and you're all rowing in the same direction and trying to achieve something.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't really see any word that really is a perfect fit.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring up the Survivor, because like they had their tribes, but people have labeled when doing the poll Archimed as a tribe, but the thing about it now is, in Survivor, if someone thinks immediately about Survivor, like, well, I don't want to be a part of something where people will turn their backs on me in an instant and vote me off. And so I think it's just one of those things where you can't just say, label it and say it and then not give context to why you're labeling it, because everyone's going to have different different views on different words.
Yeah. I guess I think maybe team is the best because it does imply that you're there for a reason.
Mm.
And I think that's what's missing from even family and community. But if I could just figure out a way to describe the team, but add in the warmth, add in the fact that you're looking out for each other, that would be perfect. I guess I'll have to hit the thesaurus after this and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, maybe it's something where we can say, Archimed is a team, but I view these people as my family. And maybe that will kind of hit home a little bit more because, in a sense, I think everyone can see the word family as whether you had a good upbringing or not in your family. Family is something that you're supposed to, have a belonging sense to that word. And so maybe if you say, I see these people as my family, that means you guys are a part of me. But bringing in that team aspect, like Archimed is a team because we're all working towards the same goal. And there's something here that, needs to be accomplished.
Yeah. Team Archimed is family to me.
There we go. I like that.
All right. Let's do it.
Perfect. On our next episode, we are joined by Beth Klein from United Ways to discuss what a day of caring looks like in an organization.